Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Pursuit Podcast. I'm your host, Grayson Garvin. Today's episode is my interview with Brian Lesniak, a former Vanderbilt classmate of mine, who is now the co-founder of Text10 Design and Consulting in Nashville. Text10 Design and Consulting is a specialized firm focused exclusively on cooling tower applications. I hope you will catch the fact that Brian didn't set out to be an entrepreneur, but rather saw a need while working for a larger firm in the marketplace, and from that point, set out to solve the need on his own. So without further ado, let's get to it. Welcome to the Pursuit Podcast, my friend. We're so excited to have you.
It's exciting to be here, Grayson. No, I appreciate the invite.
Absolutely. Well, I was thinking, trying to prepare for our time together today, and for the listeners out there, Brian and I go way back for multiple reasons. One, we both went to Vanderbilt together, but I will let you know he is far smarter than I am. He graduated with an engineering degree. But we also, our friendship became even more solidified. I played, for the Tampa Bay Rays, and Brian is from that area. So we kind of, solidified our friendship through, a geographical commonality there. But Brian's become a good friend, and he's, again, he just has a great story that I think I resonate with. I think a lot of people here will resonate with, and I'm really excited to help, kind of facilitate hearing your story. So thanks again for coming on today.
Yeah. And it's funny. I think Grayson, once I got to know you, I remember moments, I think when we were standing next to each other at Vanderbilt football games before we were acquainted, lamenting similar instances, there was a bond before we even knew each other,
That's right. That's right. So, again, I'm really excited too, because I think our paths have been different, but I think that there are certain pieces of the story that we can draw comparisons to. And, specifically where I'd love to start is, two things. One, you're an entrepreneur now. And I think that in our world today, starting a company, kind of going out on your own, that takes a lot of courage, and there's some, risk involved. But I think also too, the thought of owning your own business is also something that I think feels desirable in our society today. Also, your fiance, soon to be wife, congratulations, is in
Thank you.
is in the entertainment industry. Specifically, she's a singer-songwriter, and
Yeah.
that's also an industry that I think draws a lot of desire from the outside world. But both of those worlds are not without, they are great, but also trouble, heartache, difficulty, so on and so forth. So that's setting the stage a little bit. If you don't mind giving our listeners kind of a 30,000-foot view of, Brian Lesniak today, what do you do at a high level? And tell us a little bit about Madeline and what she does as well.
Yeah. No, that's great. So at 30,000 feet, I am one of the founders and managing members of Text10 LLC. So we are an organization that does two different things. So one side of the business is consulting. So what we do is we are an independent firm that helps facilities manage their cooling towers. So our clients are power plants, refineries, things like that. And we're going in and helping them understand how to operate and maintain their equipment. And the independent piece is that we don't offer the repair services that they would need. So it allows us to be impartial. It's kind of like when you take your car to the mechanic and he says you need new brakes, and you're like, well, that's because you're going to sell them to me. We keep that barrier of being unbiased, and that's really our value prop. The other side of the business, we have manufactured and brought to the market a fan brake product that is essentially a safety device for the fans on these cooling towers. So yeah, that's kind of the two folds of our business is the independent consulting and then the manufacturing of this brake product. And my role is really engineering, sales, account management for both sides of the business.
For sure. Absolutely. So before we get to Madeline, I want to make a point here that I think is important. And I think is synonymous across a lot of the conversations that we've had to this point is, and I'm going to spark note your story a little bit, but basically, you found yourself in a situation where you were assisting in a prior company with these cooling towers, and you just felt like there was a better way. And you guys essentially created this thing. Not You didn't set out right out of Vanderbilt to say, "Hey, I'm going to go create this. I'm going to go create this safety product for cooling towers in
Yeah.
power plants and refineries and things." But you were working hard. You were observant at what the market was showing you. You were working on something specific. You found a need, and you basically were attempting to go solidify the market with that product. Correct?
No, I think that's really well said, Grayson. And I'll kind of take a piece of that to start with is, it was funny when I graduated Vanderbilt, I took a job where the job offer ultimately got rescinded because of the business difficulties. And I bounced around in a couple jobs, and it was posting my resume on monster.com that got me into the cooling tower industry. Right. And then once I got there and got my hands on things, kind of fell in love with the space. So to your point, no part of me was like, oh, I'm going to go into cooling towers and create this thing. I found an organization that I felt was a good cultural fit. As an engineer, I really enjoyed being hands on, and I kind of fell in love with the space. And that's, where we're at today, where our business is focused on that space. So I think that's really well said is, a lot of people talk about, do what you love. And I don't know if I totally agree with that. Find something you like, sink your teeth into it, and you'll be surprised what you end up loving. And I think that's kind of what brought us to this. And to your other point, yeah, we were myself and my now business partner Tommy were with another organization trying to launch their cooling tower aftermarket service. And really what we found is we'd go to these power plants, there'd be 8 bidders on a project. And when we were successful, it was really through the consultation and the trust that we built with the client that allowed us to be successful in those projects. So we looked at it and we said, how do we bottle that? How do we bottle and sell that? Because far too often you come into these plants and you're building the plan and you're building trust, and then they might take that and go to the lowest bidder. So if that's really what we're good at, and if that's really what the client's valuing, how do we bottle that and turn that into a business model? And effectively, that is what became the consulting side of our business. Is we monetize those advisory services, and at the end of the day, they can use whoever they want to do it. We're just their independent trusted advisor, where we think we have the most value anyway.
For sure. Absolutely. No, that's well said. Again, side note to everyone listening, as you, I'm sure, are telling, Brian's far smarter than I'll ever be based on some of the things that he's saying. So obviously, too, you guys have scaled this into a highly successful business to this point. Um, but tell me about maybe some of the difficulties in starting a business. Again, it's easy to see
Sure.
now, again, you guys, like I said, have been highly successful in a very short period of time, and that comes with it positives and negatives. But starting a business is not easy. And, there are some things, again, I think that get glossed over when an outsider looks into a business and says, like, oh, you guys are doing great. What is there to, what are the potential drawbacks here? There could be nothing. So walk us through from an internal perspective some of the difficulty surrounding running a business.
I think one of the funnier and more trivial things is how we messed up naming the business like 3 times. And just like it's like right out of the gate, you trip over something. We were Text 10 engineering until I realized that you have to have a PE on staff license to have engineering in your business name in the state of Tennessee. So, we file the business and then change it 3 times.
You live
So
and you
that's
learn,
that's a
right?
still exactly right. So I think, but that's a silly footnote. But yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing is um just as silly as it sounds, just trying to do your best and keeping your eyes open, because you're not going to know everything, no matter how well prepared you think you are. I think that the one piece of advice that I was given before we started is, you know, be ready to not make any income for a year or two, you know, and and the fact that everything is going to take 3 times as long and cost 3 times as much as you expect, and that's okay. Honestly, it provided your model accounts for that, right? And you're in a position in life where you can, take those lumps. But I think sitting here now, if I would have known that before I started, I don't know, maybe the ignorance was bliss, right? Because that's scary to think about, but it's so real. I mean, whether it's the development of our fan break product or even when we really started hitting critical mass with some of our consulting engagements. We did a handful of projects that barely paid, our business insurance the first year, so I think it's just everything is going to take so much longer than you expect, but it's also okay.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that that's well said. Having obviously started my own business, I feel the same way. I think it's interesting too because I think that's also easy to hear, and somebody listens and it resonates with them. It's like, oh yeah, okay, like that's
Yeah.
you know, I won't take an income for 12 to 18 months, no big deal. But then when
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
actually live those things, or you're trying to implement something, and yet it takes 6 months instead of 3, or 12 months instead of 6, it's a completely different dynamic when you are actually living it yourself, and you're intimately involved in the business. I mean, it's something that, yeah, I've said this sometimes about parenting, where it's like, I feel like parenting is the best and the hardest in the
Yeah.
same sentence. And that's kind of, there's not a lot of things in life that are like that. Um, I think running a business might be similar in that, where it's like it's the best. It's so
Yeah.
fun to have your fingerprints intimately, around a business, but it's also the hardest in the same sentence. And like I said, other than parenting and maybe a couple of other relational, dynamics, there's not a lot of other things in life in this world that I feel like really seem the same way.
Well, we'll do episode 2 of this podcast when I have kids and I can compare to the second piece of that. But yeah, no, I mean it's different when the training wheels come off and it's no longer an exercise in an MBA class or something like that. And that 3 times as long and 3 times as much money is your pocketbook,
Yeah.
right?
That's right. 100%.
Yeah.
100%. Um, and so this too, obviously, is a podcast about you, but I want you to talk to me
Yeah.
a little bit about, again, you're the fiance of a singer-songwriter.
Yeah, yeah,
And
sorry.
no, 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 no. But I think there's so much correlation, to athletics and or athletics and music, because at the end of the day, it's entertainment, right? And it's entertainment in different ways. But I think just like business ownership, there's a lot of, romanticization of
Good word.
those industries. And there's so much good. I mean, obviously she gets to sing, she gets to go on tours, she gets to record songs, she gets to sing on stage in front of thousands of people. Like, all those things are awesome. But,
Right.
we were at lunch a couple weeks ago, and there's also there's a lot of uncertainty, and there's a lot of difficulty that exists in that industry as well. Walk me through kind of that, not necessarily both of those things, but walk me through that kind of tension, right? Where there's so much good, but there's also this downside that a lot of people don't see, that is also equally as challenging.
No, that's really good. I mean, the joke you hear in Nashville a lot, especially around the music industry, is like, "Oh, you've been at this 10 years, you're just about ready to be an overnight success," right? And I think that's been very true of her journey, right? Is coming into town, she at the time was one of the youngest people signed on Music Row to a pub deal, and started writing songs, and just really hadn't found her sound and found her style. And like you said, it's something that's romanticized. A lot of people growing up in small towns all across this country want to sing country music or something like that. So the competition's high, right? And you're bringing this glut of talented people to one area. So yes, you're chasing the stream and you're chasing your calling, and you're seeing other people get their breaks and get their success. So I think it can be challenging to be in that space, especially with I think the parallel is probably better to athletics than business because of the high level of competition. There's only so many spots. Where I think in business, maybe a little bit, just because one business is successful doesn't mean another one can't be as well. But I think in athletics, whether it's baseball or whatever, there's only so many teams, right? That need so many pitchers. So I think in music, um, that becomes part of the challenge. I think the other thing in music where I've seen with her journey is I think it's a little bit easier as a business owner to separate your identity from the business as opposed to the music industry.
Mm,
I think in the music industry, you as an individual, your artistry is very tied up in your own personal identity. So sometimes when people don't like the music or the style, it's hard not to see that as like a personal slight. Where like Brian Lesniak and Text 10 cooling towers feel like very different things. You know, I don't feel
right.
like my personal identity's ever been tied to the business. So I think there are a ton of parallels in the grind behind the scenes and how difficult it can be and how it's romanticized. But there are a lot of gut punches that you take over the years. I think the biggest difference being, that personal identity piece and how that can be even more so challenging in music.
That's so well said. I had a conversation with somebody else recently, and yeah, I think that's the most difficult thing where because so many people know you as the musician or know you as the athlete, and it's not, it's not, Madeline the individual or Grayson the individual. It's,
Yeah.
you're that respective vocation. And I said a lot. It's like that's what I did, not who I was. But if
Yeah.
you're not careful, because of the noise that surrounds you so often, it can
Yeah.
very, it can very quickly become who you are. And that's when it becomes, I think, a real slippery slope because, we shouldn't be defined by really our successes or failures. But
No, that's right.
I think when you have that identity issue, specifically in those industries, because I agree with you, I think it is hard there specifically. It just is a slippery slope. I also think that it can be hard, and I'd be interested to know what you think. The thing that I do think can be challenging business wise for entrepreneurs, and it doesn't have to be um, it doesn't have to be gender specific, but I think oftentimes men find a ton of purpose vocationally. And I think
Sure.
as entrepreneurs, if we're not careful, you lose the rest of yourself when everything is poured into your identity, what you feel like is the success or failure of your respective business. I think that can also be a correlation as well.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's right. I think especially early in the business, as I reflect on really getting things off the ground and when you don't have a website, you don't have, your tax filings done, you don't have an accountant, you don't have there's so many bases that need to be covered that it's just naturally sucking down a lot of your time. And you lose the opportunity for hobbies, and unfortunately, you're missing some personal events, and you've got to make some of those sacrifices. But when you don't take a break or like at least isolate yourself or compartmentalize to some degree, yeah, it can certainly be consuming. And I think the fact that it's occupying so much of your time almost necessitates what you're talking about, becomes your identity because that's where your time is spent,
Yeah.
and it's a fine line, right? Because I think we also romanticize hustle culture, you know, and there's times when you got to grind for sure. But I think too much of that, and I'm as bad about it sometimes as anybody else. I like to say I'm a recovering workaholic. But if you don't do that, yeah, you can lose your identity and just doing your work 24/7, you know?
Yeah. I think that can very easily become the scorecard too, right? And
Yeah.
yeah, it's how hard am I working? I think I see that, with kids a lot too, where, oftentimes, you poured so much into your business, you're pouring so much into your kids, you're pouring so much into your marriage. And then oftentimes if it feels selfish, but taking that step away and whatever you want to call it, unplugging, taking an afternoon to yourself, taking an hour to yourself, 30 minutes, it doesn't matter. Or it's like, oh, I have so many other things going on. What ultimately occurs in those moments is you actually then become recharged and a better version of
100%.
yourself when you're back re-engaged into the things that you need to take care of.
100%. Gosh, you took the words right out of my mouth. I think, yeah, I think that's something I've learned about myself through this journey is just being able to work out for me was, I've gotten into distance running over the last couple of years and just
You're an
when
animal.
I can go on, I don't know about that. It's great because, I was never the fastest sprinter and, in marathons, it's just slow, just keep going forward. Um, but yeah, I think when I can get a 5, 6, 7 mile run in. That's honestly some of the time I do some of my best thinking for the business or for other aspects of my life. And there's almost like a Zen aspect to it. The runner's high is a real thing. It's a real
Yep.
thing.
It's I think you may be thinking the same story that I am as, you're talking about running. Brian and I actually decided that we were going to do a 4 mile run on a July
Oh my
4th.
gosh.
This was probably like 8 years ago. And it probably was 1,000 degrees in Nashville that day. And
More or less. Yeah.
we decided to run together. And I started off I'm not a runner. I'm
Came out of the gates real hot. You
Yes,
came
I
out of the
came
gates real
out of the
hot.
gates real hot. I didn't think I was running that fast, but come to find out I was. And after about mile one and a half, um, Mr. Brian Lesniak left me in the dust, and I was sucking wind the rest of the way through.
Well, what was going through my mind was, I think it was I had an unfair advantage because I had just, I think, run my marathon like 2 weeks before, and we were doing like a 5K or a 10K. And when you came out so hot, I was like, I'm not going to be the one to tell a professional athlete to moderate his expenditure. I feel like that's out of
Yeah.
my I'm out of my lane on that one. But yeah,
Um,
that was fun.
So good. So good. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, obviously, again, you've now, I mean, obviously you've lived some life. You've been in corporate America. You have started a business. You've run a successful business. You have, again, a fiance that's doing her own thing. How sitting here today, what's one thing that you wish that freshly graduated from Vanderbilt, Brian Lesniak knew that you know now that would have
Yeah.
saved that Brian a lot of heartache and headache?
I think patience. I think just some patience and just sometimes I think we try to force aspects of our story and, we're so especially being at a place like Vanderbilt. I mean, you're surrounded by a lot of people that are achieving a lot of great things and you're excited about what your life has in store for you. But I think what I would tell younger me is just enjoy the journey and have some patience. It's all going to come in time, right? I think I look back and it seems so silly now, but I remember graduating being like, all right, gonna start a business. What kind of widget can I make? What can I automate? What can I do? And it's that's just totally the wrong way to think about it. You know, I'd be curious of what you think, but you're the space you're working in is something you worked in professionally before you went out on your own, as is what we're doing, right? So I think again, just find something that you like, spend some time in it, and you need to take those lumps. You need to get some experience. You need to build your professional network. But you know, I think 20-year-old me was all gas, no brakes, just waiting for that, the thing to happen. But it's like, man, it's gonna come. Just have patience.
Yeah, I think that's spot on. A follow-up question to that though is, I think that patience is such an interesting it's just an interesting word because I think it has the ability to be very shallow or somebody can think about it as like, oh yeah, have patience. But truly having patience is not something that's easy. It's not something that comes to everyone naturally because it's really I mean, we're a, you know, we're a now kind of society. Like I want it now. I want it as fast as humanly possible. And most things that are desirable in life, because they're desirable, are not easily attained. And
Yeah,
so practically speaking, going back to the because I love that. I think that's absolutely right. But practically speaking, in the moments, in the hard moments specifically, how do you how do you feel like you are patient, or how do you feel like maybe looking back, you wish that you would have been more patient?
I think now, and I think it's taken some time, and I'm sure my business partners would tell you at times I'm probably the opposite of patient, but I think I think now when we're encountering a difficulty in the business, my approach or how I like to approach it is, yeah, all right, what levers can we pull to fix this? Let's sit down, let's brainstorm, let's look at everything we could possibly do in this moment. And if we go through that exercise and evaluate every lever we could pull to resolve this issue, and we can't fix it right now, what else are we going to do? So I think sitting down and thinking about the situation and looking at everything you could possibly do, coming up with a game plan, and just allowing that plan to work out, is really, I think, the right approach, because stressing about it's not gonna make it any better. And just having patience for the plan to run its course, because you've done the due diligence, you've brought the right people in, you've thought about it. Now just set the plan in place and execute it, you know? Um, I think I think that, in the past, I might have just kept pressing a little bit too much on situations that were largely out of my control, and all you're going to do is drive yourself crazy in those moments, because you're so desperately trying to fix something, or overcome something. And I don't know, it's just looking back, it just seems silly, you know.
Yeah.
I don't know.
No, I think that's good. I think it's right. I
Yeah.
think it also builds upon itself. It's like when when you have a situation that requires patience and you are able to be patient, and that situation either works out in a positive manner or maybe works out not as poorly as you might have initially thought. I think you
Yeah.
gain confidence in the ability to be patient and the outcomes that subsequently come from that patience.
No, that's super well said. Is yeah, maybe it's the experience thing. I think that's probably what settled me down in our business, is realizing that, you put the plan in place, you let it execute, and like, oh, that wasn't terrible. Um, but like you said, patience is, it's like telling somebody to calm down, right? It's the last thing they want to hear. But it's when you can actually embody that and like learn that, is when it just does a lot for your peace of mind, I think.
Yeah, 100%. 100%.
Yeah.
So this is a little bit of a deeper question. And
Yeah.
obviously we've had some great conversation to this point. One of the things that I believe that is also kind of one of the core tenets of our podcast is that fear is the enemy.
Yeah.
And in my story specifically, I think there's two kinds of fear. There's the debilitating fear that takes our mind or eye off the ball, as well as there's also positive, if you can spin it that way, positive fear that helps drive someone. I'm speaking more here to the negative fear. What's something right now that Brian Lesniak fears or that has fear of that may take your eye off the ball?
Yeah. Um, something I fear now. I'll back into that. So I'll answer first by saying something that used to terrify me, I think, with taking the fan brake product from prototype to commercial product. Um, you know, I just so desperately wanted every aspect of that product to be flawless, and was terrified of like a warranty claim or something like that. But I mean, gosh, you can look at Apple, and they make one of the finest products the world's ever seen, right? But every once in a while, somebody gets an iPhone that doesn't work right. And if you're, I think sitting now looking back at this, I think there were times where that fear was almost paralyzing, because you want to perfect this product, but like perfect can be the enemy of really great,
Mm,
And what we found is that for the large part of like our installed base on these, they've worked fantastic. But we've had some hiccups, and you meet those head on. And what's funny is, in a lot of those instances, we built stronger customer relationships because we were so quick to address it. So I kind of answered your question in reverse there, but I think that was something that I was very afraid of, related to launching a new product. Is like, man, I just don't want to let anybody down. I want this to be perfect for them. But the fact is, you could engineer until the end of time. You're going to miss something. It's just
mm,
going to happen. And if you don't, do your due diligence, be thorough, make sure it's safe. But then at some point, you just got to go. You got to go.
yeah,
You're going to be tinkering in a garage for the rest of your life.
yeah. And
Um,
you guys have done some of that, which is awesome.
yeah,
I
yeah.
loved I loved what you said there. Perfect can be the enemy of really great. Um, I think that is so well said, because I think for a lot of people, I think taking any type of risk, whether it's creating music, whether it's creating a fan break, whether it's creating another widget, whether it's going out and starting a company on your own, whether it's anything, there is there is never going to be the perfect time, or to your point, there's never going to be the perfect widget, the perfect engineering solution to use your term. I mean, I have my iPhone right here. You're right. It is, it's made Apple billions of dollars.
Right.
It's imperfect, but I think a lot of people resonate. A lot of people can be paralyzed by perfection, and
Yeah.
at the end of the day, I think too, what's further underneath that is a fear of failure, and you alluded to that.
Yeah.
And I think that there are, there are countless entrepreneurs that are, and you used the term earlier too, you used the term overnight success. And it's
Yeah.
interesting because whenever someone has success, they're thought of as an overnight success. Madeline, your fiance, has been in Nashville for a decade.
Yeah.
Well, at the point that she does something really noteworthy, she's in an overnight success. Like, no, she's been here 10
Yeah.
years,
Yeah.
grinding it out. Or,
Yeah.
when a company exits or a founder exits, that may not be their first company. And there's
Yeah.
a ton of examples of that. But can you speak to that a little bit more? What you specifically mean by that when you say perfection is the enemy of potentially really great?
Yeah. I think when it comes to it's almost my engineering brain sometimes. I want to flush out every potential avenue and just design this thing into the ground, right? And in that specific example, like when are you ever going to launch the product? Because you could test everything. So, in that aspect, what we ended up doing is we created just essentially like a product charter, a set of requirements, right? And tested and validated to those set of requirements that met and exceeded industry standards. And once we passed those and we went through, multiple years of testing, it's like, okay, we've got to go at some point. But I think, not just in that product, also on the consulting side of the business, whether it's our documents, myself and my business partner Robert, I think he and I share a love of making documents beautiful to the regard that we're wordsmithing the things into the ground. And it's like this thing is going to be 3 weeks late if we don't just stop and send it in. So it plays into that too. But I think the other thing too is, a lot of my professional experience in the corporate world was in sales. And I remember when I first started doing presentations for clients, and I'd be up all night working on these PowerPoints and what have you. And I think preparation is critical. But at the end of the day, if you can just take the meeting with the client and show up and be halfway prepared, that's better than not taking it. Right. And I think that was something that I had to learn was I always wanted to be so prepared, and you become more prepared and kind of can do things on the fly as you gain experience. But I think early in my career, if I didn't, I'd be doing interviews with myself, in the Hampton Inn in the middle of the night, getting ready for these mock conversations with clients in the morning. And then at some point you get so busy as a business owner, you can't do that anymore. Right. So what are you going to do? Not go and take those meetings? Of course you're going to. And the fact of the matter is if you can just show up and do your best, it as cliche as that sounds, it has a way of working out.
Yeah, I think that's spot on. I think that's spot on. Well said. Well said. Yeah, perfection is the enemy of sometimes really great. I love that.
Yeah.
So, to as you sit here now, like I said again, you have lived. We're not that old. I would like to think so. I don't have any hair, but again, we're not that old.
I'm getting some
Um,
gray ones. I'm getting some gray
hey,
ones. So yeah.
um, but as you sit here now, this is a podcast about success and successful people, and you've again materially and objectively had success throughout your life. Um, but success is also an interesting term because everybody defines success a little bit differently. So for Brian Lesniak, um, how would you define success within your own life, within your own working career?
It's a great question. I think I'll answer that in two parts. Um, professionally, when I think about the business, it's interesting, especially, You go through school and you always have very public displays of how you're doing, right? You get grades, you're on honor roll, whatever it may be. But when you get into business, especially in a business to business environment, your clients don't typically take the time to say, "Hey, man, that was really great." So how do you define success? I really look at in our business, people voting with their dollar. And we're blessed to have tons of repeat clients. And to me, that's a strong indicator that we're doing right by them. And not only the repeat clients, but we've seen a real growth in our professional network and word of mouth referrals and things like that, really driving organic growth for our business. And to me, that I mean, it just means a ton because I feel like it's the best kind of compliment you can get in a business environment is that folks are coming back and continuing to trust us and telling their friends to trust us as well. Um, so that's really the measuring stick that I've kind of sat back and thought about with regard to the business. On a personal level, everybody talks about the financial piece, but I think that the two things that I'd really lean into is fulfillment and work life balance. Um, I was blessed with some jobs, one in particular that I could think of that was just it was awesome. It was awesome company. I was compensated well, but I just didn't feel fulfilled. I didn't feel like I was using my gifts to the max. I didn't feel challenged, right? And you get to the end of the day and you can't help but feel a little bit empty, like you're leaving something on the table. Um, and then in the same regard, right, you could have something that's fulfilling and financially you're getting compensated great. But, if you miss your kid's birthday and you miss, your grandfather's birthday, all those things, then what does that really matter? So, I think inevitably, I don't think see it as like financial riches. I see it as financial security, achieving financial security. But then also, balance and fulfillment. And I think it's those three pillars in your personal life, I think represent success.
Yeah, I think that's huge. It's so important because yeah, I think it is, financially speaking, I love the word that you or the term that's used, financial security. Because from a balance sheet standpoint, experiencing, clients for close to 10 years myself, it's like it's rarely, the fulfillment or the security that's felt is rarely tied solely to a number on a balance sheet.
Yeah.
And I think the outside world that looks at wealth or riches or however you want to say it, I think the outside perspective is that yes, if I can only achieve X, I'll be fulfilled. Well,
Yeah.
it's really you would be fulfilled if you had a little bit more than what you have right now. And everyone would say that, even from no dollars to, Elon Musk dollars. And so I
Yeah.
appreciate, you saying that because yeah, it is far more about, again, those other things that are what is fulfillment, what is work life balance, spending time around the people that matter to you most.
Yeah.
That's the stuff that's priceless.
Yeah. 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 It's funny too, is, I look back in, growing up, just playing sports myself and, my parents, I mean, gosh, they never missed a practice. Right. And that always meant a lot to me, but it means even more to me now, realizing what sacrifices they ultimately had to make, not only in their own lives, but professionally to be able to do that. You know, it's that's the piece that really rounds out your life. That I think is crucial to any degree of professional success.
For sure. Without a doubt. Without a doubt. Well, this has been awesome today. You do know, um, obviously I am a finance guy, so this hasn't really been a financial conversation, but I do like
Yeah,
to sprinkle in a little bit of finance towards the end of the
love it.
conversation. Um, and I love to ask folks, so young Brian Lesniak, what was the
Okay,
first thing that you remember saving for when you were growing up?
gosh. I tell you what, I tell you one thing that I remember saving for, and it's hilarious now, is I would save money up all year long to blow it on fireworks for the 4th of July. Quite literally burning my money. Um, and
So
we'd
we had
go
a
out
young
there in the
arson
front.
on our hands.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I those little battle tanks, which are the worst firework. I don't know why I was infatuated with those, but we'd set up these battle tanks and, 9-year-old me would march in there with $100 feeling like I'm a millionaire and come home with these fireworks and just burn them up in the front yard. It's like, gosh, but yeah,
I
a
love
lot
it.
of a lot of strong financial stewardship from an early age.
I love it. I love it. Well, Brian, it's been awesome having this conversation today. I'm so glad that others got to hear a little bit more of your story. So
Uh,
thanks for being our guest today.
Hey, this is fun, Grayson. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Well, folks, thanks so much for listening today. Remember here at the Pursuit that we believe that fear is the enemy. Hard work, focus, and perseverance is what it takes to win. I'm your host, Grayson Garvin, and this has been the Pursuit.